Hi, and welcome to this session, System Alerting and Monitoring. My name is Murray Oldfield. I'm a technology architect for InterSystems, and I work in the technology architecture and performance architecture team. We're a worldwide group. We talk to customers and we advise them about vendors and architecture, and our focus is on helping customers understand how InterSystems products and the infrastructure work together, together with your applications. Our focus is on helping you understand things like performance monitoring and capacity planning and benchmarking. So we sort of form a triangle with yourself and the vendors and InterSystems to come up with the best solutions. And to do this, we need a really good understanding of the characteristics of the system and how it's working normally, and the vendor's products. And usually there's a bit of education on each side. Today's session, really my goal here is to make sure that after you view the presentation, you understand what's new in the functionality provided by IRIS for alerting and monitoring. We call it SAM, System Alerting and Monitoring, and the big picture of how SAM works. And how you can use SAM to monitor your systems, to troubleshoot problems and plan for growth. Today, the preview for most of you it's a little bit of a journey. I'll go into the weeds just a little bit and we'll see how SAM works. And I do that so you can prepare and make some decisions, as you're planning your IRIS deployments and how you want SAM to be working for you. Look, we've got lots of ways of collecting metrics, and metrics are a great way to offer insights and tell us many things. But to be perfectly honest, you had to do a bit of work to make these metrics visible. It was effectively headless, and there was no real native way to display alerts and metrics. So most customers I see aren't monitoring their systems. I find it really surprising, but you ask them, oh, well, what's your CPU? Are you getting alerts? Is there anything going wrong with your system? And they don't know. It's not until we start to do some investigations that we really see what's going on. So really, this is our way of bringing this to the surface. So, the other thing that's happened is that applications back in the day, it was a monolithic system. You might have one or two servers, one or two applications, but really everything's changed. Where systems are made, and services are made of many, many components. Containers, IRIS shards, whatever service, on many instances, on many hosts, across clouds, across availability zones. So to monitor all this, it has to be automated, it has to be available, it has to be scalable, and it has to be intuitive. So that's why we started this project with SAM. And recently you'll notice that InterSystems has started embracing open source and some third-party integration. Things like Python, is natively in the kernel now. So if you need that for your machine learning or whatever it is that you're doing with Python, but you need the power of an IRIS database or API manager, those sort of things. So SAM is in that same ballpark. We're leveraging IRIS and the third-party products to add significant value and making the whole thing greater than the sum of its parts. So, historically, like I said, InterSystems data platforms are a stack in a box. And so for SAM, we realize that now things are just spread all over the place. So we're going to incorporate some major open source components, in other words, free. In this case, it's Prometheus, and add value by extending them, using the unique capabilities of IRIS, with our 40-year history of enterprise applications. So I'll dig into this a bit more, and let's take a look at what SAM is. So on the right of this slide here, what you'll see is some number of targets. Now, those targets, could be any number of IRIS systems, whether it's, your test systems or your production or, some number of shards or whatever it is, 1 to however many systems that you've got. And they don't have to just be IRIS systems, and we'll talk about that during the demo. In the middle, SAM Manager, which is the heart of this. And for that, we've chosen Prometheus, which is a hugely popular open source monitoring solution, and we'll look at that a bit more. And we've enhanced its functionality by extending it with APIs, and with our knowledge of how IRIS works, we've made it a little bit more functional as far as monitoring IRIS systems and leveraging IRIS as the primary data source. Prometheus comes with a database, but once you start to monitor lots and lots of systems, your databases can get really big. And of course, that's what we do. We're really good at highly available, scalable databases. So we don't really know how well a system is just by looking at metrics. You need to look at alerts as well, so you know when a system is under stress. So that's all packaged in there as well. And it's all brought together in a container. So it's a really simple, basically a one command to bring all of this up in a batteries included, ready to go sort of way. And on the right-hand side of the chart, you can see we've got some clients, and this is how we interact with the database and the SAM manager. This presents metrics in a graphical form and also shows our alerts and things like that. So in summary, what SAM is, we add scalability. We can keep the data forever, basically. Out of the box, Prometheus will start to roll around after 15 days. But if you want to do long-term analysis, and especially something I'm going to talk about a bit later, is bringing in not just CPU or what your I/O is, but application metrics, then you might want to keep this data for a long time to compare to last year, to compare before the upgrade and after the upgrade and whatever. If you do start to bring in your application metrics, whatever is important to your business, you'll need security. So we have built-in authentication as well, and APIs. So the APIs that we built into IRIS that Prometheus is consuming are available out of the box as well. So you don't have to use SAM. So that's another thing I just want you to put in the back of your mind, is that if you're using Prometheus already, you don't have to use SAM. You can connect directly to the IRIS database. If you're using something else like Splunk to consume, the metrics that are coming out of your systems, you can plug into IRIS as well. So we'll see that too. All right, what I'm going to do now is a quick demo. It's going to show you how easy it is to get up and running with SAM. And I want to do this so that you can see, I always find it easier if somebody shows me first. I can go and read the manuals later, but how do I get up and going? Okay, so the demo is going to run now. Okay, I'm going to do a quick installation of SAM. I want you to see how simple it is to get up and running. And I always find it easier if somebody just walks me through the first time, and then I can go back and read the documentation and make adjustments and fine tuning if I have to. The main thing is that you'll need a VM with Docker and Docker Compose, and then we go and pick up the files for the couple of components. The first one is at the GitHub repository, where we have the Docker Compose file plus configuration files for Prometheus and Grafana and so on. And the great thing about that is that you can actually change these, if you can, for your application or your environment, whatever your deployment is, you can customize it. You can put in your own dashboards and things. You're not stuck with what InterSystems provides basically as a template out of the box. The other thing we're going to pick up is from WRC, the SAM manager image for which contains IRIS and all the InterSystems bits and pieces that you require. So we'll download that as well. Okay, so I'm just going to switch across to a terminal window. I've already downloaded those files that I told you about. The Unix file is from GitHub. The other one is from InterSystems. Now, the documentation here tells you how to get that image into Docker. This is a nice, quick, simple way. So we'll do that. And this it's the equivalent of downloading a Docker image from the internet. So I'll let that start. Then I'm going to... Okay, that only took a few seconds, but this demo is going to be quick. So let's move on. What I want to do too is just extract the configuration files I told you about, if I can type properly. So I'm just going to create a folder called run. I'm going to cd in there, and then I'm going to just extract those files. Now what you can see here is, it's pretty small. There's a configuration directory, and you can see we've got YML files that describe Prometheus and the dashboard for Grafana that's out of the box. So these are the things that you can change. If I cat the Docker Compose file, this is something that you could change, if you needed to change port numbers or anything else that you need to for your organization. So let's cd into, cut and paste to be quicker, into this folder. You'll see also that we've got a start and a stop. And this is just how you get things going, or stop them if you need to make changes or for some other reason. So really the start just makes sure that we have our base set of configuration files, and then it does a Docker Compose up. So let's start that. And what that's going to do is it's going to start to pull the other images that are required for SAM, so Prometheus, Grafana. So I'm going to pause the recording again. We'll come back to this in a sec. Okay, so that has happened, and now what we have here is not only have the images been pulled, but the containers have been started. So if I go back to my browser screen, and I'll just refresh, and it's alive. So I can log on as super user and sys, the usual logon we have for default out of the box, and then just update these, and we're in. So that's SAM up and running. The next thing we're going to do is create our cluster, my GS demo, and then what we can do is start to add our instance details, and we'll cover that in a few secs after I've had another chance to talk. Prometheus is at the core of this. Now I just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up and orientation, just so you can understand what it's doing and start to put it in your mind, so when you go away and think about how you're going to start to use this, what's involved. So Prometheus simply works by what they call scraping, of pulling time series data from applications. And applications are typically some kind of exporter. So IRIS is an exporter. It's built in now to IRIS. But also lots of other things like Apache for your web servers, or so there's one called Node Exporter, which exports all, kernel metrics, for example, things like VMstat and IOstat or perfmon from Windows. And you can also get ones from network providers and so on. So there's lots and lots of libraries out there for languages and frameworks which you can hook in. And you can also hook those into SAM, which we'll see in a minute. I do want to tell you just one more, we're just getting one more down into the weeds, but this I think really clarified it for me. The metrics are really simple. You hit the API and it brings back metrics. IRIS will return about 200 things every time you request information. And if you request them every 5 seconds, that's how you build up your chart or whatever. So it's text-based. It starts with what is the metric, and then you can add some labels, which in this case, it's for the widge and what directory it is, and a value. And that value in our case is how much space we've got left. And then you can slice and dice that. And that's how, as we query it and build up dashboards, we can display the information and display it together with other things. The other part of this, which we're going to see in a moment, is Grafana. And Grafana is the way to visualize. Once again, it's an open source. And in most cases where you see some organization using Prometheus, they'll be using Grafana to visualize that data. So you can create, so we ship out of the box a template application. As I said, I do a lot of work with customers looking at performance and capacity. So we built a dashboard that contains half a dozen key metrics that you probably want to look at, and built in some alerts. But really, that's just a starting point. If you really want to make this work, you'll go and customize that. You'll build new dashboards for maybe service specific or application specific things. So that's really where the power of this comes in. So we're going to dive into another demo now, and I'm going to show you SAM in action during a benchmark that we've been running recently. It was just a way for me to have something to show you and to talk about how SAM works. So that demo is going to start now. SAM's been set up now. It's got a few interesting things on it. So there's 3 clusters that we're monitoring at the moment. One has 1 instance. That's the Global Summit 2020 cluster, which is in fact me monitoring SAM. This other one, Shard Demo, has 10 instances in it, and it's just a grouping of 10 machines I care about. In this case, it is in fact a cluster, in that it's a shard cluster, but they could be just any machines that you care about. We can see that recent alerts and errors are showing up here, and we can click through onto the cluster and look at them in detail. So let's go and do that. So here's that Shard Demo. The machines are all right at the moment, and here's our instances. If we wanted to click through to a particular instance, we could. We could also, so let's go and have a look at Colo Bench 3. If we wanted to look at the system management portal, we could, and we can see that there's not much happening on this machine at the moment, but I do know that I was running some stuff overnight, so let's go and have a look and zoom in on that. Once we click through to Grafana, we have different functionality again. I can go back and look at what happened in the last 6 hours, say. Here's a benchmark run overnight, here's a benchmark that was just finished, and this is a bit artificial and synthetic data, but I just wanted to show you something. Most of the panels on the screen are the ones that are shipped by default with SAM, but I've added this extra panel here, which is a cluster-wide view of CPU. And the data from that is not coming from IRIS, the data from that is coming from Node Exporter. So it's coming from the operating system on each of the instances. And if you wanted, you can move, if my mouse works, we can move things around, we can structure this as you want, and then you could save this. Where the real power is, though, is when we start to really customize this for what you need it to do. So in this case, a cluster, a shard cluster, there's certain things we want to look at. So what I did, I created a whole new dashboard, and you could do the same. So I've created one called Cluster View. On the left is more of a cluster-wide view of the world. On the right is per individual machine. So if I wanted to look at that, Shard 3, you could see that the charts on the right are zooming in on chart 3. So I've got on the left things like CPU across the whole cluster, but then I can see CPU for this particular machine if I was concerned about I/O weight or how much system time it's using, for example. If I wanted to look at just the glow refs on a particular instance, remote or local, but also I've got the glow refs across the cluster. So if there was one instance either having very low glow refs or very high, it was an outlier, maybe that's something I care about. We're running 45 million glow refs across this grouping of machines here. So it's not so much about the data here. I want you to get to take away today that the data on this is being pulled from lots of different places. It's being pulled from IRIS, the glow ref data. It's being pulled from the operating system, in this case CPU, storage, and also you can create your own metrics and export those as well. So you can cluster together machines, and then you can start to put your
own particular application metrics on here as well, whatever's important to your business.
So I'm going to summarize now and let you go away and think about what you've just seen. The thing, probably a key thing about looking at metrics, it's great to graph your CPU or your glow refs or whatever it is that you care about, but really think about what it is that your users care about. That's the thing that you want to be monitoring and alerting on. Align your monitoring with services and things like latency. How quickly is a screen coming up? Think about things that you might want to integrate with your applications. If you want to look at something like transaction rate, if you're a hospital, what are the episodes per minute charting in the same panel as your CPU and your glow refs? How is that changing over time? So don't be constrained by just thinking about system performance. This is really quite powerful, and you can take it a lot of ways. We've got great documentation. If you want to pause the presentation, you can copy that down, or just go into the documentation and search for system alerting and monitoring. InterSystems.community.com. Sorry, back to front. That's the only side make you remember it. Community.intersystems.com is our place where there's thousands of developers and users of IRIS interact and talk to each other. And in there, I have my corner, which I talk about capacity planning, performance metrics. So I talk about what sort of metrics that you might want to be monitoring, what they mean, and more I'm adding posts to do with SAM itself and creating dashboards and templates. Because these are open source products, not just InterSystems, there's some great resources out there. If you're wondering how Prometheus works, or you get stuck with a query, you can Google it, or there's some great books which have really helped me. But there's plenty of resources out there, and the websites for the actual open source products themselves as well. All right, that's it from me. If you have any questions, probably the best place to communicate with me would be through the community. And my Twitter handle is there, but to be perfectly honest, you're more likely to see a picture of the beach or a dolphin than anything tech related. And thanks for viewing, and I'll talk to you later.